Hello everyone, welcome back to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 24th of February 2021. In today's video, we'll be discussing this couple of issues. This article, Being Petroleum Independent, is taken from the Hindu. Now, whenever we are talking about energy security, we also have to talk about another important issue which is very relevant in our present times. That is the need for clean energy, because we already know that because of the impact of climate change, it has been causing a lot of devastation in different parts of the world. It is altering the state of our environment and it is having a spiraling effect on our lives. A case to the point is the rise in mean sea level from the times of industrial revolution. At the same time, we cannot ignore our energy security, because without one of the major factor for production, that is fuel for generating any sort of economic activity, we cannot progress further. We also have to recognize the fact that it is because of fuels alone, mobility and transfer of goods from one place to another became very easy after the industrial revolution. Given this state of things and the fact that India is entering into a phase where a majority of the population, say from 15 to 55 years of this working age population, the percentage of population would be 60% out of the 100% of population in the next few years. And we are expected to hit a peak in the year 2037. So we have a window of nearly 20-25 years before we can actually reap in this demography. That is called the demographic dividend. And a crucial factor for that is having access to cheaper fuel. At the same time, the impediment is the climate change and lack of access to clean energy. So, how do we deal with this conundrum? On one hand, we are dependent on fossil fuels. And the problem with fossil fuels is that we tend to depend on imports. If you take a look at our balance of payments, we have the current account and capital account. Within the current account, we have visible segment which constitutes goods, and the invisible segment which constitutes, say, for example, services, incomes, and transfers component. The major problem of our balance of payments is that we have a current account deficit, and majorly because we are importing fossil fuels. So our deficit has impacted our sovereign ratings as well. Why is this relevant? Because it impacts our economic stability. Unless and until we have a balance of payments, there will be economic instability on various macroeconomic indicators. If we have a very high current account deficit, we will have to borrow from external sources, or at least go to the International Monetary Fund, pledge our resources, and take some sort of a loan to ensure that balance of payments happens. And this situation we have faced in 1991, when the status of economy was in a very bad condition. So looking at either from an economic imperative or from environmental angle, it is very clear that we have to make a transition from these fossil fuels to cleaner energy sources like solar or battery vehicles, etc. Now, how do we do this? We have to analyze this from a short term perspective and a long term perspective. For reducing the import bill, that is the first priority. What should we do? We have to get access to these fossil fuels at a very low rate and ensure that they are stored properly in our strategic reserves. So, strategic petroleum reserves should be enhanced. This capacity should be enhanced. That is the first step. Secondly, when we are talking about long term growth, we are talking about fundamentally a structural change in our economy that moves away from fossil fuels towards battery vehicles or even fuel cell based vehicles. This will ensure a net zero emissions and move towards what we know today as the post carbon economy. That is, an economic model which does not rely upon exploiting the carbon resources in our environment. A few days ago, we have discussed how hydrogen based fuel cells are important and also analyzed the various sources of greenhouse gas emissions. After industry and agriculture, we have realized that it is the transportation sector that contributes 17% of the carbon emissions. Now, it is in this context that the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, which was introduced during the UPA 2 administration regime, is very important. Despite the fact that this is a well intended scheme, it did not work out because of an inherent policy flaw. The problem was, if you compare the European market with Indian market, in India, the policy was to subsidize the hybrid vehicles rather than pure electric vehicles. Now, what are hybrid vehicles? It's a combination of electric vehicles plus traditional fossil fuels. So, the European market was much more attractive because of the tax incentives given for European car makers. Therefore, the market was entirely concentrated on Europe and it was ignored for a very significant amount of time in India. So, electric vehicles became a norm from way back in 2011 itself in Europe, but the size of electric vehicles market in India is significantly small. So, how did the government handle this? Firstly, we have made a transition towards Bharat State's Emission Standards 6 or BS6. This fuel emission norms came into existence from 1st April 2018 in Delhi instead of 2020. Even though the entire country is yet to make a transition towards this BS6 fuels, what is more important is the fact that we have already enforced this standard and we are already fast tracking this process. The second one is the National Biofuels Policy has been a success in the way that we have almost increased our ethanol mixing with petrol up to 8%. Ethanol is considered to be a very efficient way of utilizing our agricultural waste, and also it enhances the ability to reduce the emissions of the fossil fuels. The next step had been to increase the focus on electric vehicles adoption and manufacturing by FAME 2 scheme. All this is fine and well according to the author, but the urgent need is to come up with a zero emissions program where the automobile manufacturers which are producing the traditional internal combustion engines should be forced to move towards e-vehicles. This zero emission vehicles program is mandating the production of electric vehicles by traditional automakers. So what this will do is it will catalyze or fast track the adoption of e-vehicles in this country. The primary complaint today is that e-vehicles are not available at scale and the charging infrastructure is not available, and that is the reasons why consumers are hesitant to move towards e-vehicles. Otherwise they would make a transition. But the problem exhibited by the automakers is the fact that the battery life and the battery technology in our country, along with the charging infrastructure, the manufacturing ecosystem is not strong enough. Now, this is like the traditional chicken and egg problem. We are not sure how to approach this problem. But if we can actually force certain automakers by giving them incentives to produce electric vehicles, this transition will be much more faster. So if we can come out with this program by 2024, our petroleum peak demand will almost hit the peak in 2030 itself, and after that there will be a smooth transition towards electric vehicles. So the slump in the movement of the internal combustion engine vehicles will continue further till we completely become a electric vehicle driven economy. So electric vehicles are the future, and there is no reason why India should not adopt it, given the fact that we are not a fuel based economy like the Middle East. Also, we have to address the specific issues of two-wheelers and three-wheelers, where a majority of the segment uses petroleum. Now, incidentally, the electric vehicle manufacturing has been picking up in two wheelers and three wheelers. Now, they should become cost effective and easy to use. So, the government must move in this direction to encourage automakers to make uh, efficient two wheelers and three wheelers, and with that, we can reduce up to 60% of our fuel consumption. After the economy picks up, oil prices will definitely increase. So it is up to the government to address this issue by encouraging e-vehicles, because sooner or later we have to make this transition to ensure that our current account deficit remains at a very sustainable level. So we have to make a transition towards e-vehicles is the bottom line of this article. The next article is taken from the Live Mint and it is titled China's weaponization of rare earths is very likely to backfire. Now, what do you mean by rare earth? So, rare earth minerals or rare earth metals are those metals which are presently very significant in our new age economy of Industrial Revolution 4.0. So these metals are very important in building the hardware that is required for this Industrial Revolution 4.0. We are talking about hardware like semiconductors, we're talking about sensors, etc. And luckily for China, it is having a significant amount of rare earth deposits. Now, in this bid to monopolize the Industrial Revolution 4.0 economic model, China is contemplating a ban on uh, export of technology that will facilitate rare earth extraction from the minerals. The problem here is it is more likely to backfire for China as well. What is the reason? Despite being one of the significant producer for rare earth metals, China indeed imports significant amount of rare earth elements from Vietnam, Malaysia, and various other countries because the reserves are just not sufficient. The push for this move is driven largely by the growing demand at China's domestic market. China wants electric vehicles, they want hybrid vehicles, and all the other eco friendly vehicles to account for all new cars sold by the country in 2035. So, this push for e vehicles is what is driving this move. So last month, the Chinese government announced draft regulations that would impose state oversight over the entire supply chain of rare earths from production to exports. There is a growing competition from countries like Australia, where Australia signed an agreement with US to ensure that the production is not halted. In this context, China must learn certain lessons from history. And this is not just confined to the production of rare earths only. If you take a look at history, whether it is the 1973 oil embargo, wherein the Gulf states refused to give oil to the OECD nations and US specifically, what followed as a consequence of this move was the fact that US has actually diversified instead of depending on Gulf alone. This has done sort of a permanent damage because US has actually diversified its sources and it also increased its domestic production. Another example, if you take the case of say soya bean, US has been exporting soya bean to Japan. Almost 92% of the soya bean trade or the source of soya bean for Japan has been US. But in 1970s, because of the downfall in the production of soya bean in US, a ban was imposed on soya bean trade. What followed as a consequence was Japan has actually diversified its sources and permanently it has altered the soya bean trade. So Japan has helped Brazil to build a base where soya bean was produced, and this industry flourished in Brazil. So today oil seeds can be sourced from Brazil because of this move. So it is a permanent structural shift. If similar lessons are to be observed across history, this is an only indication that China will be at the losing end in the longer run if it carries out this move. So, according to the view of the author, China must refrain from weaponizing this rare earth trade and go for an inclusive development. It should not try to monopolize it because it is simply not possible. History has time and again showed us that. That is the gist of this article.